we're just going to start because there's so much to talk about today. We're talking about integrating science and sacred traditions. We're talking about intuitive wisdom, transformative experiences designed to strengthen your energy field, awaken your natural gifts, and bring clarity, peace, and confidence into your life. Dr. Marie Feuer is coming to us today with 40 years of expertise in psychology and spiritual practice. This is just going to be a really amazing conversation, and I'm really thankful that you are willing to converse with me and be in this space. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And you are so easy to talk to, connect with. It feels like being at home, like with a good friend. So thank you for that. That's really nice.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's what I strive for in this space because, the reason what's on your plate exists is to elevate people's journeys and help them to feel comfortable enough to share those journeys. And that's what we're here to do today.
Yeah.
Um, so there's so many layers, but we need to start somewhere. So, why don't we start with talking to us about your beginnings? You were not always immersed in spirituality.
Oh, I had to be dragged into it, kicking and screaming. So I was raised second generation immigrants. My mother was a union organizer. Her grandmother was in the Red Stockings, which was women's lib in the 1800s. My mother was women's lib before women's lib existed. And I was taught, help the working class and, help each other and make the earth a better place. And that religion is the opiate of the masses was a slogan of that era. Because in many parts of history, religion has been used to subdue a population and used to get control and power and money. At one point, the Catholic Church owned 2/3 of all developed landmass on the planet. So I was raised anti-religion. And I came into spirituality because I was a major activist. Like when I was 17, I was a community organizer for about 7 years, living in probably some of the poorest ghettos on the East Coast, working to teach conflict resolution, how to organize food co-ops, how to get medical clinics up and running, do fundraising, things like that, go after the housing authority for rat control, stuff like that. And I ended up going out to the American Indian movement occupation in Wounded Knee, which was an armed occupation. And I was working with the Quakers, who are pacifists, nonviolent. And they said, why should we fund you to go there? And I said, this is exactly the place we need to be, where people think the only solution is weapons. And we need to talk about building schools and shutting down the government schooling for Native Americans, et cetera. So anyway, they funded me to go out there, and it was scary. It was an armed occupation. And at the end of it, we actually had a national news blackout. I mean, I personally experienced it as I was running a lot of press out of Rapid City. And the government arrested CBS and tore out their film, threw the reporter in jail, shut down all the wire services, and we couldn't get any news out. And the government said, now we're coming in and we are going to kill everybody and there's going to be no news coverage. So it was terrifying. And I was like 19 at the time. I look back going, I was so young, but I didn't know any better. So after that, I stayed on for treaty negotiations with the federal government and the American Indian movement, and ended up spending a lot of time with Leonard Crow Dog, his dad, Frank Fool's Crow also. Henry Crow Dog was Leonard's dad. And so I went into as a social activist, support our First Nation people. We need treaty rights invoked again and get back stolen land. But then I saw all this crazy, wild spiritual stuff happen in ceremonies and drumming circles, and visions would happen and owls would fly and lead people out of danger, and psychic phenomena. We traveled to New York, met an author there named Richard Erdos, who was made into an honorary Lakota citizen, though he was from Vienna, because of his immersion in the Sioux culture and writing about it. And he talked about a lot of stories of, just phenomena. And I went, okay, that's great, but that's Native Americans. And I'm just like this New Yorker who pays rent. So there's probably that cool stuff out there, but it's not for me. I'm just, white person who pays the rent in New York. And so I ended up moving to Tucson, Arizona a few years later. And I literally just kept meeting these weird people who did like tarot readings, and they made sense. And I was like, okay, but that's kind of strange. And I had a series of events. I actually started doing tarot readings with an ancient Egyptian deck, nothing new agey. It was like really old black and white deck. I don't even know if you can find it anymore. No one I knew used it. And these readings said I was going to die. It's like, this is weird. And it kept saying it like for months, the same message. It's like, this is bizarre. I mean, if these cards don't work, why am I getting the same message over and over and over? That is strange. So then I went to see someone else who used tarot cards, who was a nurse, thinking, well, she has science. She's medical. She's a grown-up. She has a job. She's not running around with crystals and, living in a basement somewhere. I'm not judgmental at all, right? Totally. So she did a reading and I went, oh my God, does this mean I'm going to die? I mean, it was the same reading. And she said, well, if we switch these two cards, I'd say, yes, you were going to die physically, but you're going to die in every way. So then I had that reading. I said, what should I do? So she sends me to a psychic, like a $20 psychic. I go see this $20 psychic. She says to me the same thing. Like, your whole life is going to crumble. You're going to, everything's going to happen but dying. I said, what do I do? And she said, well, you need to get balanced. So this is over like just months. Within 8-9 months, all of this starts tumbling in. And she said, well, there's these people I heard about that do a balancing program. So I went to meet them, and they were 70-year-old metaphysical people who, as the man Walter said, we would have never been friends in real life. He was a staunch Republican, very conservative. Yeah, he had been a CEO, CFO, very corporate. And I was like this revolutionary, end the war, diversity for everybody. So we used to laugh that, if we had just met regularly, we'd probably hate each other. And they had 40 years of experience in things like radionics, which was a machine that did remote healing, that was declared by the American Medical Association as fraudulent. And yet the government went and seized all these machines, confiscated them, and destroyed them. Maybe they're in a vault somewhere. I don't know. So I'm thinking, if they're fraudulent, why were they destroyed? Why were they confiscated? If they're useless, who cares? Just leave them out there. So here they are with this radionics machine, and I start learning remote healing, and it's working. And I started meditating with them, and no woo-woo stuff, just silence. And I had these phenomenal experiences equivalent to nowadays psychedelic trips. Literally by sitting, I was laying on a massage table, and Walter would sit in a chair next to me, and it would be like a psychedelic trip. And all these visions would come, and these insights would come. And sometimes I'd walk back out into the living room. There would be other people there that I kind of knew, and they would say, go look in the mirror. And my face, I swear, like my bones moved. My face was completely different after one of these sessions. They charged nothing, by the way. They were retired. I think they charged like $10 a month for their little retirement program. So I just hung out with them. That was it. I was like, okay, these are older people in their 70s, 30 to 40 years of experience. They knew so much. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. So I just hung out there, went there for lunch. I'd hang out in the pool. I'd go there all the time. All my friends kind of left because it was boring for them. It wasn't, guardian angels weren't coming in, and, it wasn't new age. It was just metaphysics. And that was it. That was like, I couldn't get away from it after that. I just kept running into psychics and healers and animal communicators. And a lot of them are kooky. To this day, I'm, just because you have a gift doesn't mean you're sane or balanced. It just means you're talented. Like, if you met an incredible artist, that does not mean they're a good person. They're just really talented. So I like my skepticism, because it saved me from a lot of woo-woo stuff. So that's how I got into it. And I got kind of, I feel like, tricked into going into Los Angeles. And because I had worked, when I was doing the revolutionary stuff, I worked in revolutionary performing arts with a very famous group called the Living Theater, Julian Beck and Judith Molina, who are internationally famous for doing street theater to raise consciousness. And they were actually arrested in Brazil for a year. And the only reason they got out with their lives is the international art community went insane and got them out of Brazil. And I met them in New York and worked with them for right before Wounded Knee. So I thought, well, I'm going to go back to performing arts in LA. I don't know what I was thinking, because LA is Hollywood. It's not revolutionary art. It's Botox nowadays, and boobs and muscles and commercials. So later I looked back and went, what was I like? My brain wasn't working. I'm going to go to LA and do something good to raise consciousness with art. But it turned out that's where I met a meditation teacher that I've stayed with on and off for 40 years as my main teacher, who is a channeled spirit. And I was already sick of channels, because just because you're on the other side doesn't mean you're brilliant or evolved or good. It just means you're dead or from another galaxy or whatever. But I have the same skepticism. Who are you? Somebody says, I'm channeling. I said, well, maybe it's Al Capone. Maybe it's a pedophile who is dead and has some karma here on earth. Like, I just don't take it for granted that just because you're a ball of energy instead of in a human body now, that you're suddenly evolved, because evolution happens on the other side as well, too, as far as I'm concerned. So I was already sick of channels, but my teacher was an older Chinese man, and the channel that came in was like meeting Walter and Marta. Just right off the bat, it was like, it wasn't like, oh, I found my master. It's more like, oh shit, this is the real thing. Because when you meet the real thing, it's time to get to work. Like, it's not going to be fluffy. So that's how I got into all this stuff. And it was my meditation teacher who kind of pushed me to keep developing what I do, because I always saw myself as like, I'll be the janitor in a healing center. All my friends are talented, and I'll clean up, I'll collect the money, I'll be the bookkeeper or something like that. So he really, really encouraged me to get into all that stuff. And the thing I liked about my teacher to this day is no one is encouraged to become commercial. There's no like, if you study with me, you can become a Reiki master, or you can be a healer. It's more like, you're going to be a regular person who can do magical stuff. And I loved that, because it matched my original social justice passion, which is everybody deserves to have a rich, full, balanced life like that. And if you were a tribal leader, your job was to provide for the tribe, not to get rich. And when I was around the First Nation people, medicine people, these are like unbelievable medicine people. Like Leonard Crow Dog was never educated in the white system. He learned to speak English late in life. He spoke Lakota. He wrote, in that language. He had virtually no education, and he was shamanically selected, like signs happened to say he was going to be a medicine man. So where did he live? In a rundown hut where we had to collect gas. For gas money, we would collect soda cans and water bottles, what do you call it? Glass bottles. And we'd go turn them in to get money for gas. That was Leonard and Henry's level. They were not wearing $4,000 Native American beaded suits. They were regular people in extreme poverty. Frank Fool's Crow, the same thing. And I was like, so here are, in one time, we went to Woodstock, New York, and there was like $1 billion teepee set up for Leonard to do a ceremony. And all these wealthy hippies, I mean, they were loaded. They're wearing, beautiful native clothing. And there's Leonard, looking at this wealth. I mean, it was his first time off the reservation, and we did it for fundraising and publicity. But the amount of money just that these guys were wearing could have supported him for like a year, it's just the discrepancy. And I think that's always made an impression on me that if you're going to be a healer, it doesn't mean you're wealthy and you run around in $400 yoga outfits and wear amethyst. You're just like this person with a lot of gifts. And in the tribal days, the village took care of each village had a shaman, and chickens were given and food was given, and they helped build a house, but the shaman wasn't wealthy. And also the shaman lived in the village. So when the shaman wasn't being a shaman, they were farting and picking their nose and tripping and making stupid comments. But when they put on their medicine hat, you're like, whoa, okay, this is something. But it was balanced. Like they're a person and they're sometimes an idiot. I mean, Leonard was so funny sometimes. You couldn't believe he was a medicine man. He would say, I make collect call to the creator. He always answered, he would say things like that. And then he would laugh at himself, right? So that was the model, between my spiritual parents afterwards and the First Nation people. This kind of reinforced for me the idea that we need medicine people everywhere. In every neighborhood, we should have people that do magic. And we can all do this magical stuff as long as you're not doing it because you think it's going to make you a better person or more loved, or now it's a career. And, now that I've been initiated into the 5th level of Reiki healing, all I have to do is, help people. I don't have to meditate. I don't have to eat well. I don't have to exercise. I don't have to work on my childhood trauma because I'm a Reiki master. I don't think so. Not my model at all. So I'm still very cynical. I'm extremely judgmental, and I like being judgmental. When people say, don't be judgmental, I am a raging codependent. I've worked on that. I've gone to adult children of alcoholics for like 15 years. My parents were not alcoholics, but they were adult children of alcoholics themselves. So it was handed down to me. And I used to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But it's my judgments that save me, that when I pick, especially psychically, if I pick up somebody's a weirdo or they've got some predatory energy, I used to go, in the early days before recovery about codependency, I go, oh, I don't want to be judgmental. Maybe they're just having a bad day. But then I learned, like, no, what I'm picking up is accurate and better to be safe than sorry, have some boundaries up. So I call that being judgmental. And when people say, judgmental is bad, I said, well, you're judgmental every second of the day. The shirt you put on was a judgment decision. Now, we could call that a judgment call instead of being judgmental. So there is a distinction. My judgmental is to protect me. It's not to condemn anybody else. But I want to be judgmental, like this person isn't good for me right now. This food isn't good for me. This healer doesn't feel right. And now with all the cult stuff that's going on, all the revelations, Sai Baba had over 300 incidents of pedophile behavior with young boys. Maharishi, who used to sit in his little white diaper and everybody went to India, but his inner circle is now revealing he used to curse. He used to have women sent to him. I mean, he was kind of a disgusting person when he wasn't sitting on his altar acting all groovy. And Yogi Bhajan's been busted. All these people. So I am so happy about my cynicism and being judgmental. It's like, just because you say you're a guru, or just because you are really talented psychic, who are you as a human being? Do you have boundaries? Do you have integrity? Are you greedy? Have you healed yourself? Are you a sexual predator? Are you an abuser? And thank God for all this cult stuff that's coming out now and making it okay to talk about this, because in the early years of spirituality, I would be condemned for talking like that. You're so negative. You're so judgmental. This person is, he has been this way his whole life. And my response is, really, where's the evidence? Well, he said so. I'm like, oh, that's good. He said so. Okay. And now we know it is really healthy to go, who are you? And that's, again, why I like having people be magical on their own, be local, and be transparent. And a lot of times people will criticize me for things. Like, I'm very blunt. I grew up in New York on top of my cultural history. And even astrology wise, in one system, I'm a Scorpio, and another, I'm a Sagittarius. They're both famous for unbelievable lack of diplomacy, no matter how hard I try. And I tell people, well, don't you want to work with somebody where you see their faults? So now you can't idealize them. You don't want to be like me. You don't want to emulate me. You can't put me on a pedestal. I'm just a human being who can do really cool things, like, say, an incredible musician. You know, they're a great musician, great, but that doesn't mean they're a good husband or a good wife. So yeah, I came in that back door, and I think it kind of saved me. And I think otherwise I could have easily joined a cult once I got a hold of, all that cool spiritual stuff.
Yeah. Wow, Marie, that was just an amazing share. I don't really know else how to say that in the moment. There was so much there. One of the most standout things that you talked about within all of that, I think is really important to say, at least out loud for myself again, is the importance of humanizing the healers among us, the importance of acknowledging that they are just like you and I, right? They may be able to do amazing things and have gifts and talents, but that doesn't make them amazing humans. And I think,
Exactly.
yeah, I think we find ourselves trapped in the confusion of that in a lot of different circumstances in life when we think that we're amongst somebody that needs to be idolized, which nobody really should be, right? But that is nonetheless, and putting ourselves in a position where we are vulnerable in the worst way.
Yes, yes, yes. And that's the thing. If you're beautiful, if you're strong, if you're wealthy, if you're in power, or if you're magical, people are going to put you on a pedestal. I've had people call me master. I'm like, oh my God, we got to stop this right now, right? And I do that gently because I understand they are looking for someone they feel they can trust and lean on. But like how the Black Lives Movement has said, it's up to white people to educate themselves on white supremacy. We're not going to educate you. You educate yourself. We got enough damn problems. Same thing, women's lib. We're to the men. The men say, tell us what to do. No, motherfucker, find out for yourself, Sorry. By New
No,
York.
that was amazing. Thank you.
Get your
I
own.
felt your passion through the virtual world here.
So it's like, men, educate yourself. I can point you in the direction, right? So I have a responsibility to make sure people do not idolize me. That is my job to do that without hurting their feelings and without discouraging them either. And also, yes, my mentors, I look up to them, but I also don't want to become vulnerable to them. But we owe that to them. And the biggest thing I think too is that mentors need to model uncomfortable conflicts and figuring stuff out so we can learn how to do that. Instead of learning how to be perfect, we learn how to be resilient. Like one of the things when I was a professor, the HR department told me that I was a walking lawsuit. They said, you say stuff to students that like, oh my God, they should be suing you. And we don't understand why that's not happening. And I said, because my energy is in order when I say it. I love these guys, but I am also going to say to them, really, you're handing this into me? This is the worst paper I've ever seen. Now, you're not supposed to say that as a professor. You're supposed to, be gentle and give encouragement and be positive and all this other stuff. But I was like, are you kidding me? And the students would come up to me a year or two later and say, you are the only one who cared enough to be straightforward with me, because that's hard. I was risking my job doing it. It was inappropriate behavior. I am risking lowering my ratings as a professor, which means I don't get a raise or I don't get classes or, all the other competition stuff that goes on. And I used to also argue with my students, and they would tell me, you taught me how to argue because you're not vindictive, you're not mean, you didn't punish me, you didn't lower my grade, nothing. And I heard this over and over. I argue with my dad now. I can stand up to my mother. I learned to stand up to my big brother because I modeled a mess for them. I stayed in it with them and I wasn't perfect, but I didn't leave and I was kind and I had integrity and I was also spontaneous and emotional. So like one of the things I hate about therapists, my mother was a shrink, so I kind of react a lot to therapists, and I've been exposed to psychology since I was 17. So it's very hard for me to find a therapist to work with because I'm usually no more than them. And also I get triggered just because it was my mother, right? But here's one thing I hate about therapists. Why do they talk to you like this? Like, really? What is that tone of voice? Can't you just say, wow, that really sucked? Why? Where's the normalcy in it? Where it's like, I want reality. So, and that's not for everybody. Maybe some people need that tone of voice, but we also need people that, like show up for real. And when students told me how much they got from being able to have a fight with me, a power figure who could, quote, destroy their life in that particular class. And not only did nothing bad happen, I stayed their friend. I encouraged them. And there was literally no bad vibes. Like I didn't have any leftover stuff around them. And they're like, wow, so this is what it's like for two grown-up people to have a difference of opinion and work it out. This is how we end world wars, folks. Like if we can't learn how to do this. So I think leadership has a huge responsibility, not only for transparency, but for having those risky conversations, because I risk stuff as a professor. And when I do this in my own business now, I've had people, I would say, in this area, which is very Christian, very fundamentalist, and very conservative. The first few years here, 60% of the people came to see me would throw a check at me and slam the door and walk out because they were coming to hear that they were blessed and they had a gift and Jesus loved them, or, their guardian angel loved them. And I would say things like, you've got a lawsuit coming, there's some stuff happening. The next couple of years are going to be really tough. So let's talk about how you're going to get through that. Wham, slam the door, back in a year or two, in the middle of a lawsuit, going, okay, it's here. Now what do I do? So in other words, I risked losing my business by being real. And I've worked on psychic hotlines, and here's how you make money on psychic hotlines. Psychics are going to go crazy and throw crap at me, I'm sure. But I worked for a really great company, love the guy, love everybody. But even some of the people that work there would tell me this stuff. You read someone's mind. Instead of like really looking at what's coming down the pike, I tell you what you think is coming down the pipe, what's going on in your mind, a kind of telepathy. So now you go, wow, she's really good. Why? Because you agree with me, because I'm telling you what you wanted to hear. And the people call you back and you make a lot of money on those psychic lines doing that. But imagine this is why I never made money on those lines. A guy would call me and say, is this the one, blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, listen, you're not going to meet your one for another 2 years. Well, that was the end of them calling me because they wanted to hear, next week. And then next week, when they didn't meet someone, they'll call back and they'll hear, well, because the moon changed and Jupiter is conjunct with, blah, blah. But in a month, this is going to happen and she's going to have red hair. And those guys get a lot of phone calls. Now, not every psychic is like that, but commercially, that's what works best. But to say to somebody, you're not going to get somebody for 2 years, they're not calling me back on a psychic hotline and paying $5 a minute. Holy crap. For me to tell them what they want to hear. I find that so unethical. It's horrible. So I'm very, very big about not just transparency, but how Glennon Doyle talks about we can do hard things. And Brene Brown talks about, I think she calls it rumbling. Like you just hang in there when it's a mess. You just hang in there. That's the responsibility of leadership also in this kind of spiritual developmental world is, have you ever had someone you adored, you think is smarter than you and more powerful than you, which is usually your parents to begin with, right? Imagine meeting someone like that who's real and gets a little angry or has to apologize or disagrees with you, and you work it out, and you've never done that before. It was either kiss up and get complimented and get in the inner circle, or leave and feel rejected. So this is why I don't make a lot of money. But I also can live with myself. So, and that's more important to me, is
That's a
that.
different kind of wealth, right? Is being able to
Yeah.
be comfortable with your conscience,
Yeah.
right?
And then people learn to be honest. Like they can say anything to me. Like I've had people curse me out, call me names and disappear for a few months and then come back and I'm not holding any grudges. They had to work
Mhm.
something out and I was the place they needed to work it out. In psychology, we could call it transference, when a client takes out all their parent stuff on the therapist. That shrinks are trained to handle that clinically. And that's kind of the same thing that goes on, I think, with any leadership position. There's some transference that goes on. And it's up for leadership to not abuse that, to not turn it into cult stuff and manipulation, but instead to use it to help this person be comfortable around leadership where they can still stand up for themselves, disagree, protect themselves, and do self-care no matter what the person they admire says to them. That's a huge skill. Now we become citizens. And now we can actually be in democracy because democracy is not a spectator sport. You got to get in there and say stuff, and that it's uncomfortable. I'm a fanatic, I know.
I would call it passionate personally,
Very, very.
but you are full of passion. I will say that.
Yes, yes.
The
And I'm not,
reality,
go ahead,
the
go ahead.
reality that we're looking for, the creating the citizens that we can relate to. How can we change that from what is currently found within places of healers and places of gurus and coaches and all the things? How are we finding authenticity in that?
So one of the things is a lot of people have said to me, why are you living in Ukaipa? You're so lonely there. You're so unhappy. Why don't you move? Well, I was led here. I mean, the Red Sea parted for me to move here. I tried to not move here. I tried to leave for 8 years. I could not get out of this town. But on the other hand, I thought if I was in Santa Cruz, I'd be one of a billion healers. There's nobody like me out here. So, first of all, I'd say stop trying to be a professional, anything. Do the work that you love and be of service while you're doing that. And the way to be of service is your insides have to be okay. And that means like you can't be an alcoholic. You can't be still running around with trauma from childhood that you haven't examined and looked at. Your energy just isn't that clear, isn't that healthy. Let's put it that way. Like when I was a codependent, I would help everybody, but at the expense of myself. And it wasn't healthy for me or them because I was more infantilizing people, enabling them by over helping instead of allowing them to kind of grow up themselves. So one part I would say is stop trying to be commercial. Like, I've said this before, if you go to the gym and you meet a great trainer, do you suddenly want to become a professional bodybuilder? No. You want to be in shape to go to work or have better sex or, date more. If you go to a makeup person, do you suddenly want to be a model? No. But why is it everybody learns to meditate or be intuitive and now they want to be a healer and an intuitive and a psychic? I don't get it. I don't understand that ego trip, but it's out there. So that's one part I would say is be a regular person, what I call a secret agent. You can be a healer, a psychic, a remote healer, all of that stuff, and sneak it into any job. And that's what I did most of my life. I only went commercial like 11 years ago when I was 60. I went commercial and I hated it because everybody came and tried to like eat my business up because they wanted to be better than me. When I was a secret agent, I helped the people that kind of got that I was different and I was able to help them. And they were people that would have never met me otherwise. And they didn't have to pay any money because I had a salary from a job. So, wow, that's like great. Imagine if, like some of the people who study with me now, one of them is a social worker for the county. And we talk about how to use energy work with the clients, how to use readings to help the client, how to help the client start working with energy. Does she announce any of this? Nope. Is it fun to do? Yep. Because now she's not just filling out papers and referring them to different parts of the agency. She's being a healer. Now, you don't get applauded for it. You don't get recognized. You don't get thanked. So once in a while, somebody goes, okay, I see what you're doing. But mostly you're a secret agent. And you don't get a big ego trip out of that. But I'll tell you, the quality of life is so fun. It is so fun. It's like to watch people get something and shift and have a moment with you and connect with you on this real level is just amazing. The other
I have
part,
to,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna comment on something you said there. I gotta believe part of the reason that the quality of life is so high during those times of what you call a secret agent is because it removes the need for affirmation.
Absolutely. And there's no outcome. Like, I don't have to make something big happen so somebody comes back for another session and pays me money.
Right.
A lot of people, that's how they're thinking. Once they're in business as a Reiki master or a healer, it's like, how do I get the next person in?
Mm-hmm.
And this, there's like, I have a paycheck for being a professor, or I'm washing dishes, or, my student who's a social worker, somebody else works for the city government. And she's now doing readings for her colleagues and teaching them to work with energy. And at first it's like, you're weird. Now they're like, I want to do that thing you did. She's doing this as a city clerk. I'm like, oh my God, in a Trump town. Whoa. And she doesn't put it in new age language or anything. It's just like intuitive and energy, and let's try this. And she pulls tarot cards with them. They're like, what does the card say? What? And now they want to pull a card. And I teach people to use tarot cards to learn to listen to spirit, not to do like forecasting and, control stuff, but more like telling spirit, I can't hear you. I can't hear what I'm learning right now. So talk to me through this card. So we use teaching decks, not new age angel cards or anything like that. So people like that are so excited that they get to learn all this stuff that we practice, how to do readings, how to do remote healing, how to do energy work, how to trust precognition. Like, that in 4 days, this thing is going to happen. Okay, how do you work with that in a regular job? You can't go up to your boss and say, in 4 days, you're going to go to a meeting and it's going to blow up. But you can do things based on that precognition if you understand it's real. So that's the second part of being a citizen, is self-development. And I think I talked to you about the telepathy tapes, which has me insane with happiness, because there's a body of science coming out just in September 2024 with all this testing with nonverbal autistic, but now they're thinking maybe it's apraxia, which isn't autism. It's a disconnect between the brain and the body. So here are these, we're not sure which, apraxia, autistic, the parents have been told they're a bag of meat, and we show them a triangle and a circle, and we change their diapers, and, that's all you're going to have. And they're going to be like that for 40 years. Well, they started being given spelling devices where they can punch out letters, or they can tap on a tablet. And now we're finding out they have 100% accurate telepathy. And beyond that, some of them are showing that they know 8 different languages, including hieroglyphics from Egypt, Hindi, Swedish, and the mother is Spanish-speaking, uneducated, single mom. Where did that kid learn that? And they say from the God consciousness. How can you, and this is not one case, this is hundreds of cases. And now everybody, like the Me Too movement, all the speech pathologists, the teachers, the principals, psychologists are coming out of the woodwork saying, we have known this for decades, since the 90s, maybe the late 80s. But people who brought it up were fired, lost their license, and banned. It was the reason I never became a clinical therapist, is I knew I would have lost a license. I almost lost my professor job for some of the stuff that I brought up. I just brought it up. And so this is normalizing. We're psychic. So now all the mothers and the fathers and a lot of the teachers want to learn telepathy. This is great. But here's the part I really love though, is that some are also saying, just because you learn telepathy doesn't mean your life's going to get better. It just means you can talk to your kid. You still have, and the kids are saying to the parents, this is driving me crazy because it's unbelievable. The kids who can now speak are telling their parents, you need to learn to regulate your emotions around me because we feel everything. And when you get neurotic or crazy and you're not talking about it, your energy impacts us badly. Like we go off. So the kids aren't saying, if only you learn telepathy and you're a psychic like us, everything will be okay, which is the magical new age thinking. They're saying telepathy is good, but now you got to get your shit together internally, mom and dad and workers. So that's the kind of work that I've been teaching and believe in all along, which is psychology for this life, because you're in a human body. You chose your parents before you got here, and everything that happened to you happened to make you grow as a soul. That doesn't mean you just go, oh, it's all meant to be, and I don't feel bad. No, you're supposed to feel bad so you can learn how that feels and how to overcome it, and that makes you grow in a certain way. For example, I have yet to meet one cancer survivor. I'm sure they're out there, but every cancer survivor I have met, everyone has said to me, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. My entire life changed. My priorities changed. My sense of energy changed. My experience of love has changed. Now, if I had ever said to them, how would you like to have cancer for 4 years so you could learn all these things? People would say, hell no. So I'm not saying we love those experiences, but I have yet to meet someone who has said cancer ruined my life. I've heard them say cancer saved my life because I was living on a completely different set of priorities. Where's the car? Where's the bigger house? Why are my kids misbehaving? Why can't I lose 10 pounds? I'm so sick of that vacation spot we go to. And after cancer, you look at somebody and go, oh, thanks for sitting with me. Like that is a moment, not the bigger SUV. So the internal work we need to do psychologically, because we're in a human body. And then, yes, you got to work on these tools. Like even the autistic kids are talking about when they go into the quantum field, they put like 10 pillows on their head, shut the door, and go in and create a very, very quiet space. And they work at getting into that energy space. They don't do it while the TV is blaring and, they're dancing around. So meditation, not to go to a safe place, not to calm down, all of those are good. Those you can do on YouTube. They're great. No problem. The kind of meditation that I teach, and I think we're looking at even with the autistic population that's talking, is how can I be so in my body and so present that I can receive something from another source that has no language. But here's the problem. If inside you have pain from childhood or post-traumatic stress from rape or war, or you're an addict, you can't go inside like that because all your pain comes up. You sit in that quiet and you just start weeping. And this is what happens when people first come around my meditations, is they go, I go home, I don't feel good. And I said, well, it's like lancing a wound. First, the pus has got to come out and the yuck. And then we can start looking at healing. It's not magic. If we talk about magic that way, that's called spiritual bypassing, where I don't want to feel the hard stuff. I want to get to the cool stuff. But from what I understand, what I teach is an Eastern tradition. It's not New Age. And it's where I learned it was from my spiritual parents. And then my meditation teacher is, if we can get really okay with ourselves and everything that's happened, then I can just sit here and phenomena will happen to me. So I'm not chasing down a gift. So typically, like in classes here, we meditate, and my energy field can impact their energy field. I can broadcast that energy from my own practice. And maybe because I have some talent, like, somebody's good at guitar. So apparently I'm good at broadcasting energy. So then people have these incredible experiences meditating in silence, doing nothing. Like, this is why, again, why I don't make much money. It's like, it's so boring. If you're looking at it, you're like, what's happening? And then I always tell people, see what happens during the week. And they'll come back next week and go, oh my God, I'm just not eating as much sugar, or I had a huge fight with my mother. Or so, in other words, this opens something. What really is important is what happens after, because being taught by that giant energy, whether you want to call it Jesus or Yoda or God, the creator, I don't care what you call it. I don't care if you believe it's human or it's just some giant energy field. That energy has to change us energetically, our atoms, all the orbit inside of us. So we've been shifted enough that we can actually now comprehend something that we couldn't have even prayed for. We didn't even know about it. So with psychology, we learn psychology, we practice boundaries, we practice all the stuff we learn. It changes our energy field. That's outside in. I love it. I teach it. I believe in it. This is something comes inside of us because we can be brave enough to stay present in our body. That means all the old pain isn't coming up and vomiting out of us. We've done enough internal healing work that I can actually sit in my body and not freak out, because that's really hard to do. So I can be present. So now something comes inside of me, and sometimes it feels like a psychedelic experience. Sometimes it just feels like, when I ask people, how do you describe what we do here? They go, there's no words to describe this. We cannot say what happens in this room. But I say something comes in, reorganizes our energy fields. And so now the universe, the next week, if we pay attention, if we're mindful, will show us what we were just taught without words, with pure energy. And we were taught this much, because then there'll be another and another, like laying bricks. So it takes a couple of sessions for people to see that happening. And then, to me, as it progresses, what happens is we get to a certain point, there has to be another clearing. Wounds that we didn't know we had, low self-esteem might show up, or memories of a past life sometimes show up, or a pattern like, oh my God, I did this in every single job or every single friendship. And it's like, how am I just seeing this now at 40? Because now you can see it. Your system can handle it. And we know in psychology, this is true too, that memories of sexual abuse never come up until the person is safe in their current life. They get married, everything's safe. You have a loving family. You're in a safe house. You couldn't have handled it sooner than that. So this is the same thing here, which is there's now this progression that it's not just like, oh, now I'm on the road to evolution. Nope. It's cyclical. Before every jump in energy change, there's a bulldozer that comes in, brings up yet another thing. I mean, I'm 73 and I still get the bulldozer that says, by the way, you still have this issue. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, aren't I an expert by now? Aren't I elevate? No. The bulldozer comes in and shows me, you still have this belief system. You still think this about yourself. You still feel this way. And then I'm crying, and then I have to write stuff and burn it. And I have to do all this shadow work again for the millionth time. And then suddenly I'm different. And there's no words to explain it. I'm sure some quantum physicist could make up a story about it. So this is not exciting news for most people, what I'm describing. But what happens is that also, because the people I meet with, all of a sudden they find out they can be a psychic reader. Like, we'll do exercises like, somebody give us a name, and somebody will say a name. I'll tell everybody, what's your impression? What do you get about them? And they're incredibly accurate. Now, they're not trying to be psychic. It's like the autistic kids. We are that way. We just have to get the garbage out so it can function. We have to get the noise out. We have to get the pain out. So we do all these practices, and sometimes we'll even do like readings in a class, and everybody has each other's phone number, and somebody will go, this is coming up for you. Like, so now we're talking precognition. And because everybody has their numbers, each other's numbers, they'll call each other and say, you were right. 4 days later after class, what you said came true. And they're like, yay, right? Nobody quits their job and now becomes a psychic. They're just like, wow, I really can do this. Now this changes the quality of your life forever. Because not only can you do it, you got validation that it's real. And you get to experience the joy of someone going, wow, that was so helpful what you told me. No money exchanges hands. You're not running around in white robes or anything, burning incense. You're just a regular Joe that can do magic. And imagine if a large portion of our population was like that, which is a lot of the tribal cultures. So that's the work that I like to teach for people. And then if you're meant to be a something special, a healer, whatever, the universe.
Just been like sitting here soaking it in and reforming my thoughts on things that I thought differently about an hour prior to hitting record with you here today. And I love that about these types of conversations. And it brings me to something I really want to ask you about your thoughts on putting out intentions and manifesting things.
Oh God, don't even get me started on this. I'm so
Well,
glad you
we're gonna
asked that.
start. We're gonna start because you said something in our last conversation about how basically all of that is bullshit and
Yes.
things were decided long ago about our paths and what they would be, and we're just here to figure out how to navigate that. Tell us about that.
Okay, so first of all, I really dislike the new age billion-dollar unregulated industry. I also dislike mainstream psychology. So I'm very judgmental about both. And I love internal family systems that's come out where a lot of the therapists have said we probably did more damage with our mainstream therapy than good. They're finally saying that kind of thing. Hopefully one day the new age industry will say that, because what the new age industry says is you should be able to want what you want and make it happen. So when you're in a human body, what you want is sex, drugs, rock and roll. You're like a little kid in a supermarket and you want chocolate cake and lollipops for dinner. And the universe is pushing you around in that cart going, honey, you can't have that for dinner, but we want it, right? So if I have a screaming 4-year-old in my shopping cart, I'm going to give that 4-year-old some chocolate to shut him or her up because they're screaming in the store. That is what the universe does with intending and manifesting. I need a Mercedes. I need to run a church. I need to have $1 million passive income business. So my understanding, hard earned, no one taught me this. This is from me doing readings, is that, and this is very Eastern also though, which is we're up there, wherever there is, as a ball of light with a bunch of other balls of light. And we say, hey, I want to come to Earth. And this time I want to have stage 4 cancer. And then I want to get married late in life. And I want to run an animal rescue. Let's see how that goes. And somebody else says, I want to come in here and be, like really poor and just, really relate to my poverty community and die young as an addict. And people are say to me, why would anybody want to do that? And one of the responses I have is, why do people go see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies? To have the experience. So as souls, when we're up there, it looks like a really good idea. By the time we leave Earth, in my understanding, we have been a rock, a tree, a cricket, a rapist, a murderer, a victim of rape, a victim of war crimes. We have been everything. And the autistic kids are saying the same thing too, which is to feed the big energy field. We come into the 3D world to have experiences you can't have when you're pure energy. Those experiences feed back into the quantum field that then feeds back into this field. So now we're talking about positive and negative energy like a flow, electricity, not bad things. But the new age industry, which a lot of it is based on a Christian basis, because we are basically influenced by Christianity in this country, which is Proof that you're a good person is you get shit. You get good stuff. You get your clothes, you get your man, you get your woman, you get your career, you get your car. And if you're, really good, all that works out for you. And so now the new age says, come to this workshop and I will teach you to intend and manifest. And if it doesn't work, it's your fault. You have negative thoughts, you have bad feelings, and you need another workshop from me until you finally get what you want. This is poison, absolute poison. So can you intend and manifest? Yes, I've actually seen people do this. I want to be an artist. I want to get married. And they push it and push it and push it. And they push it through these workshops or whatever other stuff that they read. And they get it. And it does nothing for them. Maybe for a year. And then they find out it means nothing. I hate it. It's yuck. So like a child screaming in the grocery store for chocolate cake, and everybody's watching and you're the mom, you give the child chocolate cake like, honey, stop crying. If you insist on intending and manifesting, the universe will give it to you to shut you up, because it's like, okay, we can't teach her. We can't get through to her. Give her the chocolate. We'll wait till she gets sick. And then maybe we can get through to her then. That's because our free will is to able to shut down our connection to spirit. That is our major free will. Now, why do I say this? Because I pretty consistently will say to someone, oh, this relationship's going to last 8 years. And it does. And I'm not boasting. I always feel like when people say, you were right, you were right. You told me what was going to happen the next 2 years and it happened. Here's what I feel like doing. Really? Really? It came true? I feel like that. Like, I don't know how I do that. My explanation is how I do that is it's already out there because you already planned your life. Our real journey is how are you going to live your life? Like you plan to be a doctor. You're going to be a doctor in this life. End of story. That's what you chose to do. It's going to happen. Here's what you get to decide. Are you going to be a doctor hooked on pharmaceuticals? Are you going to be a doctor who's a pedophile? Are you going to be a doctor who snorts cocaine? Are you going to be a doctor who's Doctors Without Borders and helps poor people? Are you going to be a doctor who is a shit to your family? Like you get to do the how. Like I decide I want to go to college and get a degree. So we're a ball of light and say, I want to go down and do this life like this. The big question then is, how am I going to get through college? Because it's going to kick my ass at certain points. That's what the 3D world has challenges in it. And this life, everything biological in this life has to go through healthy stress. The chick has to fight its way out of the egg. A seed has to punch out of the hard shell, punch down into hard earth and grow roots. If you open a cocoon when the butterfly's coming out, the butterfly dies because it needs the healthy stress to pump up and get what it needs to survive. If you help a chick out of the egg, it dies. So the new age wants to take away, and capitalism, the dream of capitalism, entitlement. I don't want to work, but I want to get everything that's owed to me. I'm going to sit here and intend and manifest and everything's going to come to me. That's not how Earth works. It just isn't. And new age people hate to hear this. And they tell me I'm being negative and I have limited thinking and, all this other stuff. So I'm not for everybody is all I'll say. I'm not for everybody. So can you intend and manifest? Yes. What I like to do though is look at it as surfing. I want to become so fluid in reading the energies of life around me that I want to know which wave to catch. I want to know which wave to dodge. I want to be able to lay on the ocean, on the board, on my ocean, when there's nothing happening and just enjoy the sun. I want to read the currents of my life and interact with my life as it's going. Why do I want to intend and manifest when this energy is so much smarter than me? I want that energy to come in and show me the waves to ride. And that is acceptance and surrender, which Westerners hate those words. To them, it sounds like give up and loser. That's what it sounds like. But acceptance and surrender is intuition. It's the ability to read the energy of something. And you want to do this, but the energy is going this way and you just ride that wave instead. Why? Because it's there. Why am I trying to control everything? That is Western thinking. So when people talk about intending and manifesting when they come to see me, I just have to tolerate it for a while. And a lot of times I'll try to find areas in their life where they got what they wanted. And then I would say, well, what did that do for you? Well, it was good, but now I want this. And I was like, well, there you go. You're like the hungry wolf for the rest of your life because you always want more. But with acceptance and surrender, everything is an adventure. We're led like, well, I'll put it this way. People who come to classes with me in a year or so, and they don't see me all the time, right? They'll end up like here, and they were here. And I say, could you have prayed to be here? Prayed to be here. And they go, no, I couldn't have imagined it. Just like I had New Age people say to me, you manifested the studio, you manifested your practice. Really? I said, if I was on acid, I could not have manifested this. There's no way I could have ever imagined successfully making a living doing this in this town. You could have given me ayahuasca. I could not have imagined this. You could have built me a model. It just didn't happen. It was magic. I just followed the energy of it constantly. And that takes also faith, real faith. Not faith like, I know Jesus is going to take care of me. No, faith is going, I have no freaking idea how this could possibly work out. There's no way it could work out, but this wave is taking me over here. So I'm going to do that wave. Now I'm going to do this way. And I'm going to do a lot of self-care because I'm scared and I'm anxious and I don't know what I'm doing really, except following this energy field. But you have to learn to feel that energy field first. There's a great question somebody posed that I still love. How do you know if it's your wounded self guiding you or your intuition? And that is the question, because if you haven't worked on yourself, your little wounded child inside of you is making a lot of the decisions for you. It's not you connected to that bigger energy. So if you cannot sit in silence without a lot of emotions, hard emotions coming up, pretty much will guarantee that it's your wounded parts that are saying, don't go there because you're going to get hurt, but let's go over here because we'll get candy. That's not real guidance. That's complex post-traumatic stress is what that is. So the idea of, past lives, all of that, I didn't believe in any of that, but I had this one experience of waking memory of a past life. Should I tell you, or are we wrapping it up?
No, I think you need to tell me.
Okay, this is the wild story. So I've had more than one experience without even doing a regression of like leaving my body in the middle of like one time an acting class with 70 people watching me, and I went to another life, came back, and everybody was clapping. And I had to then dissect the scene where I had left my body for an entire scene. Okay, that was one example. But this one, this happened over a period of years. I was standing in front of a mirror, screaming at myself, I hate you, right? Because I had to work on a lot of self-hate issue. My dad committed suicide. So there's a lot of, if he left me at 18 months, I must be despicable. I had a large knife and I wanted to cut myself like this on this cheek, right? And I'm going, okay, I'm insane. And I think I was in ACA, and I had a sponsor. So I had people, I was working on stuff, but it was like, that was some weird cuckoo flip out scene. So I drove back to Tucson a month or two later, and there's where I had been living, and I knew everybody I knew there was psychic and a medicine person. There was a medicine woman there. And among psychic friends, we have this protocol. You don't read each other. Just like if you're friends or therapists, you don't therapize each other. So we're sitting on our porch and she started doing this reading on me, and I didn't stop her, which is weird too, but she's just out of the blue started saying, this last life, you were in the military in what's now the Middle East, and you tortured people and you loved it. And everybody knew your victims, because when you were finished with them, you would carve the sign of a lightning bolt on their right cheek. Now, this is exactly what I wanted to do with that knife. And all the hair in my body stood up. I had said nothing to her. We were having coffee. I saw her that night, got up in the morning having coffee. I was like, holy shit. About a year later, I meet there's a Taoist master, more of sorcery path, like Don Juan, Carlos Castaneda's, rather than healer, it's more magic, called the 18th generation Dragon's Gate Taoism. And there's a teacher in China still teaches this, but there's three volumes about this teacher. And I was fascinated, and I found a protege of his here in Southern California. And he didn't speak a lot of English. And I drove out from LA to meet him. And he does this Taoist reading for me and in broken English. And then I said, why is my life so hard? And he just goes, bad past. I said, you mean past life? Yeah, past life. Now that he knew that I was okay with past life. I said, what happened? He said, just, not good. I said, I already know what it is. So tell me. I was really a pain in the ass. Very rude Westerner to this very nice Chinese man. And finally he goes, you in military, very bad man in military. So this was the third thing. And somebody else had said something too somewhere in there. So it was like all these people said exactly the same thing. So I finally did a session called Life Between Lives with this guy. What is his name? Just went out of my head. It'll come back to me. He was a Kansas professor and he was a hypnotherapist. And all of his people started going to this place between lives where you design your life. So after he retired, so he wouldn't get fired, he started doing life between life regressions, where you leave this life, you go up and meet with the council, and it sounds very new agey, but here's this guy from Kansas. He's a regular Joe who was a professor his whole life, 9-month waiting list to see him. And I did that regression, and that life came up. So I was talking to a friend a few months after that regression. I said, I don't know if that really did anything for me. It's kind of like I already knew it. And, I wasted all that money. I waited 9 months, had to fly somewhere. I was bitching about it. And she said, ever since that regression, you have never once talked about wanting to get off this planet. And I used to always say, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. She said, you have completely shifted from going back and kind of reliving that life. So this is over a period of like 2 years of this, input, and they all said the same thing. Very bad man, loved to torture people, mark them up, and I was a complete sadist and horrible. Now, New Age people don't like to hear this either, because all the New Age people told me I was a princess in Atlantis, that I was an Indian chief. This is what the New Age had told me, when I'm listening to people and don't pay any attention to them, but that's the New Age industry. Can you imagine getting a reading with someone and they say in your last life, you were a pedophile, rapist, and you ate puppies alive? Nobody wants to hear that, but that stuff is real. At some point you realize you have been everything in this life. We come down here to understand that. That's how we learn about compassion, is not by locking ourselves away, but by admitting when we aren't compassionate. This is how we learn about violence, is when either we've been subjected to it or we've done it. And then afterwards, like, men who have beaten their wives or other people who've done horrible crimes, when they reflect on it, they're like, oh my God, and they're changed forever. So to me, there it is again. There's, where's intending and manifesting in that? And how did that happen? How did those memories come up? And how did it change my whole psyche when I peeled back the layers of that? And so much energy around self-hate had nothing to do with this life and my father's suicide. It had to do with that leftover energy from that life that was unresolved or unconfronted. And that's not New Age material that I know of. So, the guy's name is Michael Newton, Life Between Lives, and just regular guy. And this happened to him. And after he was secure in his retirement and his pension, he went public, but not before. So I find all of this really, really helpful for living this life. And it leads it gives a depth to living without having to go buy more stuff or, do things. It's just this internal world becomes so rich. And when you sit and meditate in silence, you're not just sitting in silence anymore. You're traveling, you're learning, you feel stuff happen inside of you. And then you notice that you keep changing from just sitting with you. And I always equate it to when my students, when I was a professor, when they put down their cell phone, I would give those students 110%. The ones who had their cell phone up, I couldn't touch them. We weren't allowed to say anything. Can't criticize, it's just like they got a right to do that. So learning to sit with yourself, that's like putting down your cell phone. But if you're hurting inside, that's a really hard, if not impossible thing to do, to sit with yourself. And if you're not sitting with yourself, you cannot receive that big energy. You can through psychedelics. That is a good shortcut. Crazy story though, huh?
Marie, you have shared so many things in this conversation that are absolute impossible to ignore. And
That's
you've
how
done it and I've loved it. It's been, I mean, I want to hear all of it, you know. And the visual representations that you helped us see along the way, it really helps us make sense of things that really seem hard to understand. I really
yeah,
want to thank you for how you presented that in this conversation and the analogies that you gave, because so much of what we've talked about today is out of reach for a lot of us to grasp, and you
yes.
really made it easier to do so. So just thank you for that.
Mm. Well, you made it really easy to talk to you. So thanks. You created an atmosphere of just feeling really comfortable and connected and made it really easy to share stuff. Didn't feel formal or forced or anything. So thank you. That is a big deal that you're able to do that. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you feeling that way. I'm glad you felt comfortable here today. This has been a conversation that I think a lot of people are going to get a lot out of. There's just been so much depth of knowledge that you've shared here, and just thank you. Thank you so much for your time today.
My honor. Thanks.